Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Uncivil Law. I hope you are having a great day as always, and we are here with our Uncivil Law presents Antisocial Happy Hour. So cheers. For my contribution to Uncivil Law on Happy Hour, I will be drinking Gentleman Jack. It's Jack Daniels with a extra filtering through charcoal. So if you're curious, this is Tennessee whiskey, which as of, what was it, a year ago or 2 years ago, has a formal legal definition as far as Tennessee is concerned. So in order to be Tennessee whiskey, it has to be filtered through charcoal. And so Jack Daniels is legally bourbon and is also legally Tennessee whiskey because it meets the requirements for both. But they brand it as Tennessee whiskey and is made in Tennessee. And the difference between Jack Daniels and Gentleman Jack is Gentleman Jack goes through an extra charcoal filtration for an extra smooth taste. So cheers to you. Excellent. Very good stuff. And we are here with just a casual hangout. So my intention is to pick a night of the week, and it doesn't have to be Wednesday. We might move it around before we pick on a day. But it's my intention to pick a day of the week, during the week. So sometime Monday through Friday, probably not on Fridays, because, when society reopens, I'd like to keep Friday nights open. So probably Monday through Thursday sometime. And we'll pick an evening. And what we'll do is we'll do a live stream where I'll respond to comments from the chat from people who are there and also respond to comments from my past videos for the past week. So it'll give everyone a chance to socialize and stuff. So there's no batch shooting. There's no particular story. There's no particular anything. We're just here to hang out and discuss stuff. We'll respond to some comments, respond to new comments, see what's going on, and just share with you what's going on in general. So a couple items of personal note. First of all, I'm just happy to report that my keto diet continues to go very well. For those of you who are familiar with my Discord, you will know that I'm trying to lose weight and I have gone on an ultra low carb diet. One of the reasons that I'm drinking whiskey neat, for example, as opposed to beer or other things, is for that reason, to try to reduce the carbohydrate intake. So try to keep it a little bit cleaner. So pick something that's very pleasant to do that with, and my meals have been principally low carb keto. For dinner tonight, for example, I made 2 low carb pizzas. I bought a tortilla wrap that is very high fiber, extremely low carbohydrate, some low carb pizza sauce, some pepperoni, and some mozzarella cheese. Grill that up. Had 2 of those. Fantastic. So that was my dinner. 2 of these personal size keto pizzas I basically made, and they worked out very, very well. So I'm throw on some oregano, some Italian seasoning, works out great. So that's really, really positive. I'm happy to report that's going really well. I was able to do a workout today, which was really nice. So I was able to get back. I have a little bench here and a little adjustable dumbbells. So I was able to do some workout today, this morning. That was really plus. So I was really happy about that, getting back into that and getting that back and delivered. So that's really plus off. So yeah, it's I don't know if it's Mission's Carb Balance. I think it was their high fiber one, because I think their Carb Balance actually has one more carbohydrate and it's in the high fiber. But I think it is Mission brand, but it's fiber rich, and I think it's 4 grams of carbohydrate per, which is pretty interesting. So pretty good stuff. Also, just work continues to go well. The channel has not been going as well as of late. I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but the last 10 days, I've seen my new subscriber count plummet. I'm not sure exactly what's going on there. I did notice that in some of the videos, I have not been asking people to subscribe. And so I'm like, I wonder if that is what is the factor. So I'm making an effort to make sure that the new videos that we will be uploading at least will have the request to subscribe, because apparently if you don't make the request, people don't subscribe. We had been getting 20, 30 new people subscribing on a regular daily basis, and recently we've basically flatlined over the last 10 days. So that's not really positive. So I'm not 100% sure what the reason for that is, but that is a factor that we're trying to look into. Algorithm issues. It could be a lot of factors, but we try to look to the factors that are within my control and stuff like that. Oh, I also saw that Legal is coming out with a video tomorrow, so we can all look forward to that and possibly a rebuttal from me. So he was responding. Let me see if I can find the exact tweet he sent. Okay, a guy named Steve Valdek. Here's what he wrote. He said, Portland, a federal official who may not have been lawfully appointed, is using camouflage anonymous officers who aren't trained for domestic policing under a statute that doesn't authorize show of force to arrest protesters under a standard that violates the Fourth Amendment. To which Legal Eagle responded, just saying this, period. Video tomorrow, period. Good. I look forward to potentially rebutting that because I have a feeling it's going to be a little bit off point. So it should be entertaining. You know, it's like every part of that is like, I don't know, man. I don't know. Could be Google causing me problems. Could be a lot of things moving me problems. But yeah. We will see what's going on with all that. You'll help on the brief that. Yeah, that'll be good. So we'll see what's going on. And also, as always, I'm taking recommendations just on stuff to do on the channel, coverage, changes of tone, changes of the style, things that will hopefully be a little bit more interesting. You know, we've got something good going, but I'm not opposed to trying new things and new formats. So if there's things I can be doing that would be helpful, I'm interested. I think the current format we have is working, but, you know, I'm always interested in trying to change things up. So maybe we can do more prep stories or something like that, and maybe some more graphics or something. I don't know, but we'll see. So, do I still think Legal is smart? Well, there's an implication in your question. So, you know, there's that. Gibson Bakery versus Oblon. Yeah, didn't they settle out? I think they settled out. Uncivil laws misusing physiological terminology bothers me. Antisocial is being violent towards others unprovoked. I'm not sure which terminology I misused or how I misused it. Are you because you're because in my title you're giving me a hard time because I'm not using the words with the psychological precision that you want. I mean, this is a legal channel, not a psychological education channel. So, you know, give me a break is what I have to say to that. Oberlin is doubling down all the way. Okay, I thought they had settled out for some reason, but yeah, whenever they go to the next stage, we will follow that. Is this a hard time? It's a little bit of a hard time. I'm busting my butt a little bit for a title because it's not with a psychological precision. That's busting my chops a little bit. Yeah, it's giving me a hard time for no particular reason. So let's respond. Let's respond to some comments from prior videos, and we'll just go down and just respond to some of them and see what this says. Oberlin is in Ohio. I believe that's correct. So yeah, someone was correcting me on the pronunciation of penal versus alternative. Yes, I was aware of that. I made a very conscious decision not to change the pronunciation on the hope of getting past the algorithm. So yes, I did know the difference. I chose to ignore the difference because, again, I didn't want the algorithm to try to flag me. So, good stuff. Someone asked, aren't the federal people there federal law enforcement officers? I don't know what the question is. Some of them, presumably. Aren't they investigating the AG in that state too? Wouldn't surprise me. Sounds political. It's definitely political. Qualified immunity is unconstitutional, must be ended yesterday. The moronic judges that invented this law are the ones who should be in prison for usurping the authority of Congress. I don't know if I go quite that far, but I generally agree with the sentiment. It is, if it had a point, it has long since usurped its point. So it is, whatever point it has usurped the point. Everyone is gangsta until the judge finds you to be repugnant. Yeah, a little bit. That's true. If the protections in the Constitution are not extendable to excludable aliens as cited, what implications does it have on legal and court aspects of the deportation process? Well, they do have there is a baseline called fundamental fairness that you'll see courts sometimes use, that even if you don't have a right to due process, they'll say you have a right to fundamental fairness. So there is this like baseline for courts. So there is some ability to be heard. So whether or not they have due process, I've definitely seen courts use that language of fundamental fairness. So if you ever see a court use a language of fundamental fairness, they're referring to this thing that exists even in the absence of due process. And I've definitely seen that pop up in illegal immigration cases. Also to your point, Congress, by law, can set up processes beyond what the Constitution requires. So the Constitution may or may not require certain things. But Congress, when they were setting up the immigration system that they've set up rules and procedures that would apply regardless of their status, because Congress says they do. So Congress could theoretically abolish all that, and then you'd be left with something else. But as always, the Constitution sets a floor, not a ceiling. Congress can give more, not less. So if Congress wants to give additional process beyond what the Constitution requires, then you go to that. So the first thing I would say is go to the statute and see what it says. That thumbnail, though, don't know if you saw the original thumbnail before it got struck down by YouTube, but YouTube definitely struck down my thumbnail because it was too much. So this did have a thumbnail at one point, and it was taken down. I got an email about it and everything. If QI exists, how do you set a precedent in law? That's a really good question. Yeah, courts can do it, and they don't have to do it, and that's one of the reasons that keeps coming up all the time. If you can't convict someone for violating the law as written, if it's to be adjudicated upon previously, just a minor point, when you say convict, you usually mean criminal. $1 from Benjamin Brees. Benjamin Brees, thank you very much for your $1 super chat. It is extremely appreciated. I value it. Thank you. Qualified immunity makes no sense. It's like you didn't know the law and you can't set precedent because no one's rolled up before. Yeah, it's ignorance of the law, but it's okay because, they're police or something. I don't know. Wouldn't it be enough that the guard's actions were illegal and he could have been arrested in the same world to bar qualified immunity? In the same world, maybe. In the legal world, probably not. Whether or not it's illegal, would that be enough to overcome qualified immunity? I don't know. I don't know if I've seen a case that would say that this positively, but one would hope that the illegality of it would be enough. But why isn't against the law enough notice? Because precedent. Ignorance of the law does excuse you due to mens rea. No, that's not true. Unless the statute specifically provides for it, ignorance of the law does not excuse the mens rea. You have to have the intent to do the thing. You don't have to have specific knowledge of the illegality of the law to be convicted of it. So no, it does not get you past the mens rea. What do you think about a video on voter fraud? It's a little bit of a generic subject. If there's a specific case on it, then okay. You know what? For $20, I'll do a video on voter fraud. I'll find something to write about. I'll find an article that discusses it. That'll give me a platform. So if you want to give me $20 to do a video on voter fraud, I'll take that. Is it true we break federal law for something every day? It's probably true you break a law every day. There was a book, 3 felonies a day, which, as the title implies, suggests everyone breaks 3 felonies a day, which is probably pretty true. Yeah, the time barred behind bars got a chuckle out of me. I'm glad someone liked the joke. It's time barred, so it's also in jail because it's time barred. Yeah. Dirk the hero says YouTube is turning us all into children with these silly world bans. Yeah, that's definitely a thing. Agent, yeah, this was a typo on my part, or a misspeak on my part. Age of consent is Colorado, 17 on 18. I meant to say age of majority. And they said it's relevant, and I said, well, it's relevant to the point I was breaking it into. What the literal F? Sentiment shared. Does anyone on this comment section know about all the peaceful protesters who were just grabbed without any crime committed, including a Navy veteran who's beaten by federal troops who did nothing? I doubt he was beaten by federal troops, but, that we'll look into that. It's one thing to arrest rioters. It's another thing to deny constitutional rights to protest the incompetent president that can make a political statement. I agree completely. Whether or not he's incompetent or not, that's a whole other set. But, for people who are truly lawfully protesting, they should have the right to lawfully protest. And people who are not should not. And whether or not this Navy veteran was beaten by federal troops, while he did nothing, I'm doubtful. But if that's true, then that should be adjudicated too. So if that's truly the case, then that should be adjudicated too. And I'd have no problem, as always, removing their qualified immunity if it were up to me. So, if that's really what happened, then I hold them to account. That's fine. It'll make it easier for both parties. Gerrymander, I doubt excluding illegal people would make it easier to gerrymander. It would just change who's being counted. And where it's already easy enough to cancel it. Yeah. Deputy Marshal Sam Gerard, yeah. Listen up, ladies and gentlemen. Our fugitive has been on the run for 90 minutes. Average foot speed over uneven ground, barring injuries, is 4 miles per hour. And that gives us a radius of 6 miles. What I want out of each and every one of you is a hard target search of every gas station, residence, warehouse, farmhouse, hen house, outhouse, and doghouse in that area. Yeah, good times. This person says, I direct you to the gift of President Obama, the National Defense Authorization Act. Yes. Grants the president right to detain anyone, anywhere, anytime. A little bit. Yes. And you oppose it. And yep, this is why we should all oppose these things, because they can be used for good and for ill. Why should I listen to Alex Jones' less charismatic inbred cousin on legal matters? Well, you should listen to me because I have a legal education. That would be why. Although, then again, so does legal. So I don't know. Don't listen to me, I guess. My question is, if they're not counted anymore, and where they counted before, they are counted before. That means a state like Texas might lose reps? Yeah, depending on they might, yes. And by lose the size of power in Congress, this could affect Republican states. Yes, it would. It would affect everyone across the board. But it would be fair. It would be a fair enumeration of our numbers. So, if it hurts Texas, then so be it. If it hurts whoever, so be it. We can't judge our principles, at least legally, on the political ramifications, right? We shouldn't be looking to the outcome. We should be looking to procedure. At least that's the way I, as a conservative, tend to think about things. I tend to think things much more in terms of process than in result. So I look to process rather than outcome. So why is it that you're saying that persons in the fourth is inherently tied to the people of the other amendments and simply not a natural reference to the corporal body? Because that's what the U.S. Supreme Court said. $5 from Nate. Excuse me. How about a video on textualism? Originalism restrains judges more on why courts aren't all outcome driven politicians. Yeah, maybe we'll do something on that. That could be fun. But back to this question, because that's what the Supreme Court said. I was reading the case that they cited and the language they cited, so I'm saying it because the Supreme Court said it. Further, why does the fourth refer to persons and not person? It does both. Is it that at the same time a person could possess another person, therefore the fourth refers to not just person, but also the people he, she owns? No, it's just really a plural singular as far as I can tell. There's really no distinguish between people and person other than the singular versus the plural. So I don't think that there's a separate meaning between people and person in that context. And that seems to be tracking with what the Supreme Court wrote, but good stuff. I'm not sure if Greg was asking me if I think it's a good excuse. I don't know if you were asking me. I'm just telling you the way it is. It's a legal education. That's what it says. So, yeah, I know. Well, people and persons mean something a little different in traditional academic sense, the way they use in common conservation. Well, that's what the Supreme Court said. And judging from the Constitution was written before common use of the word people, it's safe to assume they meant a more traditional academic meaning. Also, for what it's worth, and I don't know how true this is, but my understanding is that in a lot of countries in the world, the name for the country roughly translates to the people. So it is my understanding that in many countries of the world, the name of the country itself means the people or some variation thereof. So, everyone is referring to their own geography as these are the people, and everyone else is excluded. Who are barbarians? Well, non-Romans, right? Who is a barbarian? Easy. All the non-Romans, right? Yeah, we are the people and everyone else is not the people, right? This guy commenting on the story about the media men list. He was a victim using writing as a therapy, possibly. They should be supportive. Well, he's a man, so, forget that. If a woman was doing this and wrote novels, would she be shamed? But he's a man, though. But men and women are not different in any way, or are they? I don't know. Yeah, this guy says, yeah, I don't agree with your assessment. Uncivil, we need to define words that everyone already knows the definition of law. And I'm like, well, that's what the case law says. You're not really disagreeing with my assessment. You're disagreeing with the United States Supreme Court assessment. That's what the case says, that Verdita or Kita's case, which I can never quite pronounce correctly. It's like, that's what it says. I just read it. And that's like, well, it uses this word, and the Supreme Court itself makes the point of saying this word, the person or people, appears in the preamble, appears in the first, second, fourth, ninth, 10th, and 14th amendments. So, like, presumably it means the same thing in all those places. And so if it means this in the fourth, it presumably means that in the 14th, as it's the same word. So presumably it means the same thing twice. So you're not really disagreeing with me so much as the U.S. Supreme Court. I don't know what to tell you about that. Which, by the way, you're more than free to disagree with the U.S. Supreme Court. I disagree with the U.S. Supreme Court fairly often. Well, not fairly often, but enough. When I disagree, I my misgivings about the Supreme Court. But again, you're not really disagreeing with my assessment. That's the Supreme Court's assessment. This guy says they would also affect state legislature redistricting and probably give Republicans a few more seats in both Congress and state legislatures in California and Texas. Probably the opposite. Well, in its own state legislature, it would probably have no impact. As to the Congress, it would probably remove seats from California. It might from Texas too. So it depends. I guess the only way to solve unsolicited invitation problems is to tattoo something along your lines of "I consent to events." But then that itself is unsolicited because people will read it. They didn't want to read it, right? So when they see it, they will read it. And you always have a first actor. You can't really get around it. It's like if you put up a sign that says "I welcome all comers," it's like, well, anyone who reads it, they didn't expect to read it, right? They didn't know they'd be reading it in advance. So someone has to make that first unsolicited move somewhere along the line. So like even these creative attempts to get around it doesn't seem to really solve it, right? I mean, the only way that you could really get around it is if you had a place where everyone, when they went there, knew like certain things were true. Then I guess no one is soliciting everyone. But even the business who would be doing this would be technically making an unsolicited invitation. But it wouldn't be between the parties. So maybe you could get a third party and make the unsolicited invitation. But it's like someone somewhere has to make the move. It has to be someone as a first actor. Yeah. So much hatred for essential laborers. I don't really have hatred for anybody. I do like the rule of law. And I think that if we need to have workers here, then we should have legal workers here. I think it should be debated like policy, like Congress might do. If this is a good thing for us to have, then let Congress pass a law that reflects that. Congress is capable of doing it, so let them do it. I don't have hatred for essential laborers. I do have hatred. I don't know if hatred is quite the right word. Disdain is a little bit better. I have disdain for people who actively flout the law, and continue to do so on an active basis. So there is a little bit there. This issue is the best example of misinformation that permeates our society. If there's an understanding everyone would want to keep them here and still illegal but filling essential roles. Well, if everyone would want it, then it would be legal, presumably, because we would change the law. Migration of poor folks and refugees is well studied. It's known to have an initial investment that pays off in less than 2 years and lasts over a generation. That sounds like a policy issue to me. And maybe that's the right policy. I'm not an expert on immigration law. I just think there should be a clear set of rules that applies to everybody. And, whatever the policy should be, it should be. That's what I think. If illegal aliens can't vote, they can't be counted in the census. Well, that's not quite right, because other people who can't vote would be counted, such as prisoners and people who are not yet of age of majority and so forth and so on. So, that's a little bit off. This guy's little comment. This just in courtesy of Wickard v. Filler, decide that all things are really interstate commerce and thus all departments will be absorbed in the Department of Commerce. Cute. Appreciated. Some guys responding with the cowboy hat. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. A website with a please email, call me would be solicited contact. They would have to know to go to the website. You might be able to get around this first actor problem if you try hard enough, but you're really trying to figure a way to make it so someone is not a first actor. So even if you can find a technical solution, it's you're kind of going past my point. If I said virtually all, would you be happier? You got up to 109 some work nights. Thanks. Love the catch up. Yeah, I have been doing okay on live streams. How are we doing on this live stream? We got 55. Not so great. I'm not so sure the YouTube notifications were working. I originally had scheduled this stream earlier in the morning, and then I don't think it went out, and so I deleted the stream and rescheduled it with an hour to go. Could a state, $5 from Curtis Jones asks me, could a state call illegal alien state citizens and not U.S. citizens? Not 100% clear, because the 14th Amendment could be read, I think, either way. Because it talks about people born in the United States or naturalized here are U.S. citizens and state citizens. And so you could read that as supplying a minimum definition, or you could read it as an exclusive definition. So it's a little bit unclear. The closest case I can think of on point, and it's not really 100% that close, but dealt with term limits in the United States. So this is a good question for Curtis here asking the question. So there was a state in the South, I think it was Alabama or Mississippi, one of those states, that tried to pass a law that made it so United States representatives, and I think United States senators, but I can't remember for sure, but they could only serve a maximum number of terms. So they said, you could only serve 4 terms or whatever, and then you can't be a U.S. representative anymore. And that went to the United States Supreme Court. And Justice Scalia called it really close on the original evidence, because the Constitution says to be a U.S. representative, we'll make it simple. To be a U.S. representative, you have to be 25 years old. You have to have lived in the United States for 5 years. You have to live in the state that you're representing, and you have to be a citizen. So those things have to be true. So you have to be 25. You have to have lived here for 5 years in the United States for 5 years. So it's contemplating people who are not natural born, by the way, or people who might have lived overseas or whatever. So you have to be 25, lived here in the United States for at least 5 years, be a citizen of the state that you're representing, and a citizen of the United States. So those things have to be true. And so the question was, well, is that a minimum list or is that an exclusive list? Do you have to have those things or only those things, right? So is it minimum or exclusive? And the Supreme Court ultimately ruled it was exclusive. So a state couldn't add to it. It was an interesting case. It was a really interesting originalist fight. Scalia called it one of the more interesting cases he ever did when he was interviewed about it. It's called something versus Term Limits Inc. or something. It's an organization's name in there. So the analogy or the question would be the same or be similar. So in the 14th Amendment, when it says All persons born and naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state in which they reside. And I think that might have been word perfect correct. And if it was, points to me. The question would be whether or not that was, whether that's minimum or that's exclusive. So can you add to that or not? And I think you can make an interesting argument either way without looking at the original evidence. So not 100% clear. Not 100% clear. A state can add to what would be its citizens. It would be an interesting 14th Amendment fight if it ever came up. I'm about 50% on board with you on that one. Definitely some theatrics, but I feel strongly like the DHS political theories of their own in a worse direction. Fair enough. Yeah, U.S. term limits versus Thornton. That sounds right. So yeah, U.S. term limits Inc. versus Thornton. Interesting case, really interesting fight on that one. In a open discussion with progressive liberal, I wish you could have spent more time on minimum wage debate as the most unpopular viewpoint, and even allow GOP polls in favor of pushing up to get the votes. Yeah, fair enough. The minimum wage is a problem because an employer needs to find someone who can satisfy that wage, or else they'll be losing money, right? So whatever minimum wage you set, an employer needs to find someone who can provide at least that much value, and ideally more, because there's also going to be overhead and stuff like that. Because, you know, if the $15 wage, just to throw in a number, a $15 wage isn't really a $15 wage because there's health care and benefits and blah, 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 right? And there's compliance costs and things like that. So there's actually like, even a $15 wage is higher than $15. You know, when you add in all the costs and, you know, opportunity costs and things like that and blah, blah, blah. So anyways. But so an employer needs to find someone who can provide at least that much value, or they would be worse off for having the employee. So like, why not $100 minimum wage, right? Would be the logical question. Why not $100 minimum wage? Or why not $1,000 minimum wage? Or no, why not $1 million minimum wage? You know, why, what is the answer? And the answer implicitly is because, well, people can't generate that much value, so it wouldn't make any sense. But that's an argument against the minimum wage at large, because if you're a person who can only provide $14 worth of value for whatever reason, you're young, unexperienced, whatever. If you only can provide $14 of value and it's $15 to hire you, it doesn't make sense for the employer to hire you, right? Unless they think that they can get you up to speed fast enough that you would bring in value. So they would have to take on a loss in the initial to bring you up to training to make you valuable. But, you know, you can leave at any time and stuff like that. So, you know, it becomes a dance of a risk. You know, they're going to put money into you to train. Again, that goes, because it's not just what I'm paying you, it's money to train you. That's time and expenses and things like that. So there's all kinds of costs that go into that. So if I'm going to hire someone who can't produce $15 an hour, I'm betting that I can get them up to speed and they're going to stay long enough and I can extract the value out of them. But it becomes a dicier proposition. And for a person who can generate $14 worth of value with no training, then maybe that's not such a bad bet. But if you can only produce $10 of value or only $5 of value or only $1 of value, then it's not such a good bet for the employer, because the calculation becomes a lot harder, assuming you can ever train them up in the first place. So my point was, it makes more sense to not have any minimum wage, because then people can get for whatever experience their labor can be valued at. And then they get experience because they're valued at that much, and they'll get experience that will raise their value. And so you're not pricing out a portion of the population who is unable to work at some value. You know, maybe there's a person who, due to not being intelligent enough or not having enough motor skills or whatever, maybe there's a person who could never be more than $14 worth of value, and that person can never have a job if it's $15 minimum wage, because that person will never produce enough labor. So that person you just made permanently unemployable. So that's not really ideal. Wouldn't it be better for them to be $14 value than no value? And, you know, if you go to some place and they say, we'll offer you $2 an hour, and you say, well, I'm worth more than that, screw you, then it becomes a free and open market. People can make the intelligent decisions they want to make. People can compete on price. People get training, and it helps people grow. So, it's not clear that people are better off in a $15 minimum wage versus a $10 minimum wage. I mean, you've increased costs 30%. Businesses have to reaccount for that. Businesses close. They can't make the numbers work. And so it's not clear the minimum wage is a good idea. Now, that being the case, I do want to make clear at this point that I do think that there's a role to play for government in terms of working conditions, right? We want to make things, first of all, we want to make things fair and clear and open. So we don't want there to be deception. So that's one thing. Second of all, we can insist on certain kinds of working conditions. Like you can't work a person more than so many hours. You get there's all kinds of conditions that we can do to make the job safe, to ensure their safety, to ensure that they're not being unduly exploited. So there's things there that we can do clearly. But if people are entering into free agreement, then let them enter a free agreement at any price. So it's not clear to me the minimum wage is a good idea. And if you think the minimum wage is a good idea, then the next logical question is what number and why that number? And why not a bigger number, right? So if you say $15, why not 20? If you say $20, why not 25? If you say 25, why not 30? So any number you pick, I'm like, well, why not more? Why that number as opposed to any number? And you are sort of implicitly doing the calculation in the back of your head, even though you might not realize it, right? You're implicitly saying, oh, I think they can afford to pay this. But that's not the relevant question. The relevant question is the amount of value that you're providing. So there's a role for the government to play in making sure that terms are fair, in terms of them being clear, in terms of them being open, in terms of making sure that people are free to leave, that people are not being unduly exploited and things like that. But minimum wage itself, not clear that's necessarily a good idea. So there you go. Someone asked about 1982, United States Supreme Court of Pyler versus Doe. Yeah, they said for illegal aliens who were school children, there is this quote. Excuse me. There is this quote from this case, Pyler. It says, whatever is status under immigration law, an alien is a person in any ordinary sense. Am I misinformed? You are not misinformed. That would be contrary legal authority. That would suggest the opposite result. So you are correct. You have understood the case correctly. Which of us has a better legal interpretation? We have two Supreme Courts cases that seem to suggest opposite things. Although you could make a split on this issue on equal protection versus somewhere else, but then again, you have that same word person. But then you have to reconcile Pyler with Vergito or Keyes, and so you have to figure out a way to do that. So no matter what you do, it's a problem. So it is an interesting case. But not clear what the impact would be. But good question. Then said Vergito or Keyes is not illegal. He was legal but involuntary. He brought in and taken custody. He voluntarily allowed his residence to be searched in Mexico. Fair enough. So maybe that's a split. Someone said you can't be dragged into controversy as an innocent party. The woman who reported the Watergate break-in as secretary was excoriated and shamed. She eventually sued Igor and Liddy and lost because she could not prove actual malice. I'd have to look more specifically at that particular case and the particular analysis, and it's also possible the court got it wrong. So, yeah, I don't know exactly what they said or what they did, but yeah, that's a little bit of a problem. This guy says he'd favor an amendment that only count those for only legally allowed to vote. The hat is pretty dope. Thank you very much. And then someone mentioned this weird tag thing about me getting weird tag in my video, so I don't know if that's an issue. By the way, for the 58 of you who are currently watching, if this stream is bringing you value, I would appreciate if you would give it a like. And as always, I will just e-beg and thank you for your super chats too. It does make a difference. I really value it. I really appreciate it. Um, it lets me know that I'm doing something right, and so I really appreciate it. And also, incidentally, let me know if there's a particular day of the week or particular time in the evenings that you'd like to do this stream. I'd like to try to like find a day that works, relatively well. So let me know what you do in terms of that. I think Tim Pool is streaming now, so I'm competing with Tim Pool. Thursdays, I think Crowder streams. So I don't know, maybe Tuesdays. I don't know. We'll find a time that works for everybody. Someone asked about census is done by State Department of Concerts because your commodity bought, sold, and traded. No, I don't know about that, but as good as anywhere else. Would I ever run to be a judge? Maybe. Still waiting for Trump to exclude illegals from the country. Man, he tried. It didn't go very well. Yeah, selective service. Women are going through very slowly these days. Yes, they are. My understanding, and this may or may not be correct. So if it's not correct, someone will forgive me for making a misstatement. But my understanding is, wow, it's gone really dark. I need a light. Hold on. All right. That's better. Now we can see me properly. Let's see. Where were we? Yeah, the selective service. Oh, yeah. My understanding is that the person who shot that judge's son was a men's right lawyer who was involved in some of the stuff dealing with the draft, and his co-counsel was also working on that issue recently was killed as well. So maybe it has something to do with that. I don't know, but there's a thing there. $5 from Urel Gray. Thank you. You rock. Also, would hashtag attorney make you searchable for that? Only Eagle now shows my show Google for attorney. Okay, cool. I will make a point of putting it in my channel and stuff. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Very good. Your monitor just cracked because of my face and my beautiful face. Oh, well, that's no good. I do have a key light, so when it gets dark, I can put on the light. It is, yeah, the case is a mess. Well done avoiding the algorithm. My hat is off to you. Thank you very much. It's appreciated. Listing the cases in the videos, I can post the case citations and pin them if you want. Why not, man? That'll be good. Yeah, why not? That way I can do it. So you have to take both the patent bar and Virginia bar. I did, in fact, take both the patent bar and the Virginia bar, yes. And for what it's worth, I took the patent bar after my 1L because, well, to be a patent, they call them agents now, but, to be a patent lawyer, you don't have to be a lawyer. They call them agents if you're not a lawyer, but it's the same thing. So you just have to have the technical degree. So I took the patent bar after my 1L. So I took it in between my first and second year of law school. And then I took obviously the regular bar when I graduated law school. And I'm going to sit for the bar again in February in Texas. So that should be interesting. Not for the least of reasons that there's that new multi-state now, and I can get admitted into like 35 states at once, which was not an option when I took the bar in 2007. There was no multi-state in this sense in 2007. 2007, there were 0 states. Now there's like 35 of them or something. You can get 35 for one. So I'm going to sit for the bar again in February, so that'll be fun. Do you think software patents should be eliminated? No, because that's my field. My field is software patents. My background is computer science. So no, I don't think it should be a field. That's my job, is software patents. No. So no, I don't think that. Like the creases on my lid, the creases on my lid were made by hand, like the entire hat was. You should work on your video tags like news, law, subject matter. I do have tags, and I use a tool called Video IQ or vidIQ, and I do have a standard set of tags, and I do make a point of trying to tag videos specifically for that. So I do make a point of it, but thank you. News, law, lawyers, I'll make a point of it. So good stuff about that. I don't want to get exempted in Texas. No, I'm just going to sit for the bar again. I'm just taking the bar in July. I was going to do February, but I won if I Corona. Legendary California bar. I don't know. I mean, I don't have to take the bar again. I can practice indefinitely on my federal license, but why not? You know, then I can be cool, and I can be sworn in and all that good shit. So yeah. Yeah, more restrained manner when I was talking about certain acts. I said these are certain prurient acts of a more restrained manner. That was a good little joke of that. Texas flag stuff. Yeah. Being a straight white male will be illegal in 2022 at this point. Yeah. Most lawyers I know will never take the bar again. I don't know. It wasn't that hard the first time. Why not? It'll be fun. Was the bar that hard? I mean, okay. I didn't find the bar to be that hard an experience personally. The way I studied for the bar the first time around, I'll tell you how I studied for the bar. I did a bar prep class. It was called Micromash, which I think was bought out by Barbary and may not exist anymore. But it was an independent thing. There were no so the thing about Barbary that I never liked, which is the big one. Barbary is the one that everyone uses pretty much. But the thing about Barbary I never liked is that you had to go into a classroom and watch a tape from someone who is giving a really dry crap lecture. You know, if you've ever seen like really bad law professors, and like I'm already leagues above many law professors. Some of these stuff, their audio is horrible, their presentation is horrible, and like makes you want to die. It makes you want to die inside watching some of these people. I'd like to think I'm better than that. So Micromash had the advantage of not having any videos. It had a book, and you just read. And what you did is you did I think it was 6. You did 6 written essays. So they gave you at intervals, and you had to mail it in, and they would grade you on your essays. And then they had 2,400 multiple choice, because that's a lot of the bar is multiple choice. And I did all those over the course of 3 months. So what I did from the time I graduated law school to the time I sat for the bar was about 3 months, give or take. What I did is every morning I went to the gym. And there is another course called PMBR, which is very famous, and they had audio. And so I converted all those, I think it was CD, but I forget. I converted all that to MP3, which I had on my iPod, because it's 2007. So I had it on my iPod, and I go to the gym and I listen to PMBR multiple choice as I was working out for about an hour or whatever it was. Then I would go to the coffee shop. Specifically, I went to Caribou Coffee. I went to the same coffee shop every day. Usually I got myself a regular coffee, but sometimes it depended. And then I would study at Caribou Coffee for a couple hours. And then I would go home and I do PMBR stuff. And then I would go home and I would do stuff from the multiple choice from the course I did. And that's what I did every day for 3 months. And I actually have a really good story about this, which will show you the importance of it, right? So this course I was doing, PMBR, they had a money back guarantee, right? If you fail the bar, we'll let you take the course again for free, I think, or maybe give you your money back. I forget which it was, but whatever. They had a money back guarantee, all right. And so this will go show you like some things and how it can go to help you. So to qualify for the money back guarantee, you had to do all 6 of these essays that I mentioned, and you had to fill them out in regular increments. And you had to do all the multiple choice questions. So 2,400 multiple choice questions, and you had to do them all. And so I was studying for the bar up until like the day before the exam or 2 days before the exam. I forget exactly what, but I did finish them all. But I it took me to the last day because I portioned them out on time. And the reason I mention this is one of the multiple choice questions in particular. One of the multiple choice questions in particular dealt with this principle under the Uniform Commercial Code called entrustment. And so the question is, you go to a place that does work on. We'll keep it simple. All right, we'll keep it simple. You go to a what's a good example that when I'll just give you the damn one from the bar exam because I still remember the damn essay question. I don't remember the multiple choice question, but I remember the essay question that it was based off of because it was such a fluke that I knew the answer. But the question is something like, you own a guitar. The guitar is broken or not working properly. You go to a guitar shop to have it repaired, okay? And through a confluence of events, they wind up selling your guitar to a third party, okay? Someone else comes in and buys the guitar. So the question is, who owns the guitar? All right, that's the question. Who owns the guitar? Not who's liable for money damages or whatever. The question is, who owns the guitar? All right, it's your guitar. You go to a guitar shop. You say, I need it repaired. They say, sure, no problem. They take your guitar. All right, some time passes. They wind up selling the guitar to some random guy. Random guy now has the guitar. Whose guitar is it? And I got it wrong on the multiple choice. I got it wrong. Because under common law, bail or bailee would be the analysis. This is the language we use, bail or bailee. It's a bailment in legal phrasingology. It's a bailment. And I'm like, okay, so I still own the guitar. And the answer is no. Under the UCC, it goes the other way. Under the UCC, it goes the other way. And there's a specific rule about it. It's 2402. And I know that because I remember the damn question. So anyways, a day before the exam or 2 days before the exam, I am still studying for it and I get this multiple choice question. I answer it 100% wrong. And of course, when you answer it, because it's computer software, when you answer it when you're done, at the end, it says, well, here's all the ones you want. Here's all the ones you got. Do you want to review your answers? And of course I want to review my damn answers because I want to know why I got it wrong, right? And so I read that response in the computer and I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know that. I thought it was the other way around and I was wrong. I was 100% wrong. Okay, so here's where it comes into play. When I'm actually sitting for the actual real bar exam, it's built of an essays and multiple choice. So it's a 2-day exam, 1 day is essays, 1 day is multiple choice. So, it's 6 essays, 3 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon, and then the multiple choice, I think it's 200. You get 100 in the morning, 100 in the afternoon, right? One of my essay questions was entirely on entrustment. That was the entire premise of the question. Like I can't remember the multiple choice, but I can remember the hypothetical. I can remember the damn essay question. I took that exam 13 years ago and I can still remember the question. I can remember it because I couldn't fucking believe it. I couldn't believe it because it was 1 out of 6 essay questions. And it was tailor designed for exactly this answer. Exactly this answer. So here's the hypothetical. In this hypothetical, I don't own the guitar. It's my grandfather's guitar. So, I'm a loser college student or whatever, and I go to my grandfather and it's like, I'm thinking about starting a band. I'm thinking about getting a guitar. And my grandfather says, oh, I think I have a guitar that's just sitting around, but its volume knob isn't working. So you need to get it repaired. So he gives me this guitar and I take it to a guitar shop. I think it was a guitar shop / pawn shop. So you can see where this is going, right? I take it to this guitar shop / pawn shop and I say, can you repair my guitar for me? And they say, no problem. So they do that. And then they put a tag on the guitar and the tag says $200, which is the cost of the repair, right? And then they put it on the shelf. And then Darius Rucker from Hootie and the Blowfish, because that's the way the problem was written, Darius Rucker from Hootie and the Blowfish walks in this guitar shop, pawn shop in the middle of God knows where, right? And he says, "Oh, I'm really interested in buying that guitar." And the guy who's working behind the counter that day, who doesn't know any of this shit, right? He's just a random guy working behind the counter that day. He's not the owner, not anything. He sees the tag and says, "Oh, it's $200." And Darius Rucker, Mr. Hootie himself, says, "Great, sold." And he gives him $200 and walks off with the guitar. And of course, because this is a law school hypothetical, it turns out that this guitar is, a Fender Stratocaster, blah, 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 worth, $3 bajillion or what the hell ever, right? So that, it turns out that this guitar is, was used by Prince himself in playing, the national anthem at Woodstock or whatever, blah, blah, blah. This hypothetical. Not that it matters, but, that's, of course, we got to up the stakes to make it more interesting because it's a law school hypothetical, or in this case, a bar hypothetical. So it gives you this fact pattern, and then at the very bottom of the question, it says, discuss this under the UCC. And I'm like, I know this answer now. I know this answer. I didn't know it 2 days ago, but I know it now. I know the answer, and it's easy. Right? The answer is easy, right? The answer is it's Hootie's guitar. For the reasons I just said. It's entrustment. It's 2402 in the rules of UCC. I had lawful possession of the guitar because it was given to me. It's not my guitar, but it's my grandfather's, but it doesn't change the analysis. I had lawful possession of the guitar. I gave it to someone who was in lawful commerce in that business. It's a pawn shop. So, okay, we'll try to change the hypothetical, because it's not, in the trade, but close enough, so 2402 applies. It's Hootie's guitar, blah, blah, blah. And then I threw in some stuff about mistake of fact, which isn't really under UCC, but I threw that in there anyway. Because I'm like, well, I've got time. So let me just discuss some mistake of fact. Because, maybe I can throw in unilateral mistake of fact. Because maybe Mr. Hootie, Darius Rucker here, knows what the guitar is worth. So maybe it's unilateral mistake of fact, and maybe that somehow changes the analysis. I know it doesn't, but I'm just like, by the way, I'm basically saying, by the way, I know this doesn't work, but here's some side arguments I'm now going to throw in for the reason, blah, blah, blah. And so, basically, I got an essay question for free because of a multiple choice question I had done 2 days earlier. Yeah. So it was awesome. So it's called entrustment under the UCC. So yeah, if you're in lawful possession and you give it to a person who's in lawful trade of that goods and they sell it, blah, 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 then yes, they can give good title. They give good title when they sell that good. So, again, not speaking to anyone's liability here, right? The shop is probably liable for money and all kinds of crap. So we're not talking about money damages. The question is specifically who owns the guitar. And the answer is Darius does. Darius owns the guitar. The shop is in trouble, but Darius owns the guitar. Entrustment. And I still remember that question 13 years later because it's like I lucked into that. Oh, and it was great too. It was great. So, I didn't know anyone who was there because I was taking the bar in Virginia and I went to law school in Ohio. So I didn't know anyone who was there. But as I was leaving the exam center that day in this convention center in the middle of God knows where, I think it was somewhere outside of Richmond, as I was leaving this convention center, I asked a couple of my people, "Oh, what'd you put down for that guitar question?" And every single person I talked to said, "Oh, I discussed Bale or Bailey. I discussed Bale or Bailey." And I'm like, wrong answer. Wrong answer. I didn't actually say that to them. I was thinking in my own head. I was dancing in my own head because it said specifically discuss under UCC. It was in the call of the question. So I knew it was the wrong answer. And they said, "Oh, I discussed Bale or Bailey." I'm like, fail. That's a fail. That's a total fail. So I'm like, I'm the only one. I mean, every single person I asked said, "Oh, I discussed Bale or Bailey." I'm like, I'm the only one who got the goddamn question right. Well, sometimes that's the way it goes. Ugh. Good times. So I'll just go back through a few of your questions, or because I was so in my own head about that one. Well, yeah, I guess, but all you had to do technically was 2,400 in one sitting. There might have been some rules around that, but then again, you wouldn't get the benefit of the learning experience, and I wouldn't have gone it, either. So it's like, you know, yeah. You see our lawyers in the Ninth Circuit be drunk in court. That'd be a thing to see. How long do bar essay questions need to be? I mean, they need to be as long as they need to be. It depends on the question, but this one was pretty specific. And I remember a couple of the other ones too. There was the Blackacre question. There was the Blackacre question. The lawyers know exactly what I mean, but Blackacre is the name of this fictional piece of property where all horrible things happen. We're not quite sure who owns it. Figure out who owns it. It's this piece of real. It's a fictional piece of real estate where titles are mangled and fraud is happening and people are double dealing and there's secret land rights and blah blah blah. So there was a Blackacre question. Um, and then the other one that I remember was there was a question dealing with divorce and alimony. And there was nothing interesting about the question except the genders were reversed, right? So there was nothing interesting about the question except the genders were reversed. It was the woman who had all the money and the man didn't. And so I gave the right answer, which is it doesn't matter. At least as far as Virginia law is written, at least as far as the letter of the law is written, it doesn't matter. And I'm sure it's written most ways neutral. So it made absolutely no difference. It was a very standard, uncomplicated issue. It was a very uncomplicated issue, which surprised me, because it was so simple. But it was very uncomplicated. The only thing that was interesting about it was the genders were reversed. And I was reasonably confident that there were going to be a lot of people in the room who would get the answer wrong just because of that one reason, right? It didn't change anything about the legal analysis. I mean, he's entitled to his share, he's entitled to 50%. He can file for alimony. He can get, it's the same legal analysis as if it were the other way around, but it wasn't. It was the woman who had all the money and he didn't. So I was like, okay, well, he gets 50% is the answer. But I was convinced that a lot of people would get it wrong just because they couldn't bring themselves to give the right answer because the genders were the other way around. So I'm like, well, that's a freebie for me too. So that was really, really nice. Blackacre may also be a CIA training site. I think that's a black site, isn't it? Or do they have specifically have a thing called Blackacre? But yeah, Blackacre is this fictional piece of property where the same property is sold to two people and one person gets to the courthouse first, and oh, by the way, there was a covenant, and by the way, there was this rider, and by the way, actually the whole thing was owned by a tenant in common, and by the way, someone had land rights from wherever, and by the way, someone is drilling, and by the way, there was a surveying error, and by the way, there was an adverse possession problem, and by the way, you get the idea. And then of course, Blackacre is joined by its brethren, Green Acre, Red Acre, Gray Acre, and everything else color. So it's like, oh, by the way, figure out who owns what. Go. So good times. Is there a meaning behind Blackleaf? Yes, it's a Dungeons and Dragons joke. I've explained it before, but yes, it's a Dungeons and Dragons joke. It's a reference to Dungeons and Dragons. I played a lot of 3.5 edition, and I'd like to play again, incidentally. Watch Uncivil Law transform into his alter ego. Yes. Like the Navy vet who's just asking questions, the cop and has hands broken. Have to look into that maybe a little bit more. They should arrest her as head of the house. I said that's nice. Yeah, arrest him. Yeah. It's a lot of by the ways in the black in the Blackacre question. It has to be as hard as possible. And by the way, there was a motion to quiet title. And by the way, my personal favorite, because of Ohio, although I didn't have this problem, what's it called? There's that marital interest, which has to be specifically given away. It didn't come up because I was studying for the Virginia bar, but in Ohio, when you're married, your wife gets like this property interest in the property that's like severable from the property. So like she specifically has to sign it away or she keeps it. So in Ohio, yeah, that's the thing to watch out for if you have married couples. Like you need the wife's signature on the paperwork. And if she doesn't sign, like the man says, "Oh, I'm giving you all the title." It's like, no, you're really not. This because the wife is holding on to this residual interest. Again, that was a Ohio law. I didn't have to remember it for the Virginia bar, so I just remember that it's an issue. You got to, so maybe the wife never signed off on paperwork, so she still has this latent interest, 18 billion years later for some reason. Good times. Beginning to think this filed as a dare. Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I've been a Dungeons Master before, but that'd be good. Also, I'd like to just point out once again that Gentleman Jack is fantastic whiskey. Recommend it. I obviously got a liter, 1.75 liter, and I've already gone through not all this tonight, but obviously I like it quite a lot. You are willfully misrepresenting the positions of state officials. Well, hopefully not willfully. I try. They don't claim that the citizens should be allowed to commit crimes. The AG doesn't claim that she's personally the mother of the citizenry. It's kind of what she wrote. She claims the state government are legally entities parents. She's the attorney hired by the parent to protect their children. The Oregon government has exclusive right to control how they enforce ordinance traced on the federal highways. Well, the federal government has interest over federal properties, not just federal highway. But I don't think I'm misrepresenting. But it is an issue of sometimes simplifying, because I was pointing this out before from an article from Blackman. When you are discussing law, sometimes you have to simplify and you have to reduce issues because you can just talk about things endlessly. So trying to figure out what to put in and what not. But, I think I was pretty good. I have been to the distillery in Lynchburg, as a matter of fact. In fact, I've got something you probably don't have because I am cooler than you. You ready? Suck on that. All right, this was a common comment that I saw a lot, where people said I was engaging in I do have a Discord. Would someone be so kind as to give CO2 the link? This was a common comment I saw a lot in this video. People saying I was engaging in whataboutism. I don't think it was whataboutism so much as it was pointing out hypocrisy. Because it's like at two, right? It's like you are doing a lot of this stuff too, and you should probably look at your own house. Take the plank out of your own eye before you deal with the splinter in someone else's eye. So I don't think it's so much whataboutism as just like pointing out the hypocrisy and the irony and the pot calling kettle black and stuff like that. So it was too much of that stuff. And also on a personal level, I don't know exactly what the borders of whataboutism are, because for me, I reason a lot by analogy, and I think a lot of people do. So when you're dealing with any situation, it's helpful to look how you deal with comparative situations. And so whataboutism is comparing and contrasting, right? So you're saying, here's how we dealt with this situation. Well, here's this problem. And so you say, well, what about these other problems? And so one of the things that might be trying to do is trying to reason by analogy, because it's like, well, maybe we can do the same thing we did in other situations, or maybe the way we've treated other situations can be thought of. So if you give me a problem, and again, and you see this in the legal analysis, right? When we were interpreting the 14th Amendment recently, we were also looking at the way the Supreme Court interpreted the 4th Amendment. And the Supreme Court, when it was interpreting the 4th Amendment, was looking at how they interpreted the First Amendment from that other case, right? So I don't know if that's whataboutism, because we're talking about the 14th and suddenly we're talking about the 4th and the 1st. So it isn't so much saying, what about the 4th and the 1st? It's saying, well, how did we treat those comparative situations? What can we learn, and how are we comparing and contrasting? In the case of dealing with the Oregon governor or the Oregon Attorney General, it's about pointing out the hypocrisy. It's like, maybe you're doing some of this stuff too. Maybe you need to look at your own house before you cast aspersions. So I don't think it's so much of whataboutism. It's to me legitimate comparing and contrasting. And I don't really like whataboutism very much as a logical fallacy, because I think that a lot of time we try to reason by comparison. So it's like, well, what do I know from other situations, and how can I compare this situation to other situations and reason from it? So, yeah. Well, to be a patent agent, Matt, you have to have an underlying technical degree. So, do you have an underlying engineering degree? If you have an underlying engineering degree, you too can be a patent agent. If you don't, then all the bar school, all the law school in the world will not save you. To be a patent agent, you have to have an engineering degree, or a chemistry degree, computer science, some sort of underlying technical degree. So do you have a technical degree from the right school? Then if so, then yeah, you can do that. Great. If not, then not so much. Yeah, whataboutism in this case is holding other people to their own standards. This is what I think is right. Nate says, when people accuse you of deception for an interpretation, it's very ignorant. 8 justices have 8 different opinions. It's complex. Yeah, I don't think I'm being dishonest. This is how I reason. You can have experience to get around the education requirement. Technically correct, but I don't know how often the USP2 has ever granted that waiver. Yes, there are like 3 ways to qualify. You have to have a technical degree, and there are technical ways around that, but honest to God, I don't know how many they've ever granted. The rules do allow for it, but I don't think it's frequently done. But yeah, technically you can if you have enough sophistication. But I don't think even Chisholm himself was able to get around it. And Chisholm, who I don't believe is a patent attorney, wrote the definitive treatise on patent law. It's Chisholm on patents, right? Just like it's Landis on trademarks or Nimmer on copyrights, right? These are the guys who wrote the definitive IP treatises. Chisholm on patents, Landis on trademarks, Nimmer on copyright. So I don't even know if Chisholm is a patent lawyer. He wrote the definitive thing, but I'm not even sure that he would get a waiver. So good luck with that. Yeah. Organic chemist probably does count. You have to look at the specific list. And you're right. My underlying technical degree is computer science. And even there, you have to come from an accredited, I forget who it has to be accredited by. It has to be accredited by a specific organization, I forget. But Clemson University, where I got my degree, does qualify. Because not all computer science degrees are real computer science degrees. Some are more floaty and don't have enough science education. So Clemson University, where I got my degree, does qualify. It's on the list, and so there you go. It failed to mention the opinion was written by a Trump-appointed judge who was also a member of the Federal Society. I honest to God didn't know. I don't look these things up. I just do the legal analysis and say whether or not I agree with it or not. You don't get a paperwork for being detained. It might be theatrics, which may not necessarily be questioned. This guy says, you even said they were asking questions. Miranda need to be read. Well, once they start asking questions, they need to read Miranda, which seems to be what they did. If a man over 40 years went to a mental hospital as a child but stayed out of trouble, can he purchase a weapon? If he voluntarily goes, you have to be involuntarily committed. So hopefully that answers your question. And I don't know how that impacts children who would be involuntarily committed, but you do have to be involuntarily committed to a mental institution under 18 U.S.C. 1222G. No, not 1222, sorry. 18 U.S.C. 922. 18 U.S.C. 922G. You have to be involuntarily committed. So, and then this guy said, stop simping for the federal government and their secret police. And I just responded with, I'll start simping for you instead, which I thought was a pretty good burn, right? It's like, stop simping for them. Okay, I'll just start simping for you. Anything you want. Regardless of who does it, unidentified officers seizing people without uniforms have no business protection in law enforcement. That's why impersonating a police officer is a crime. Well, yeah, I'm not sure that having the right patches solves that problem, right? Because you could have the right patches and still be impersonating. Do you deny victims have a right to defend themselves even to the extent of shooting their assailant? Legally, if it's actually the police, no. And then goes exactly the problem I was saying. How are you supposed to know the difference? If someone breaks into my house right now, right? If someone were to break into my house right now and shouts police and they appear to be wearing the right gear, how do I know whether or not they're real police? Because if they're not real police, I can defend myself. But if they're not, I can't. So how am I supposed to know the difference? That's a really good question. I don't know the answer to, and I was trying to allude to that question. So good stuff. As someone who is okay, this is a good one. As someone who was not an attorney but has some legal training when I was an LEO many decades ago, fair. I come to this channel primarily to hear a legal point of view, not a political one. Fair. And sometimes the border is hazy. But that being the case, I have no problem trying to do both. I will always try to give you good legal analysis, and to the extent I want to give political analysis on top, I might give political analysis too. For whatever it's worth, and I know this is really far afield, but the rules of ethics for an attorney do permit an attorney to a client to also give non-legal advice. I mean, not illegal advice, but advice of a non-legal nature. So, like, if I think, like, they should do something that's not of a legal nature, I can say, by the way, you should, go do X. If it's just like advice. So, for whatever it's worth, I could give advice to a client of that isn't strictly of a legal variety. That's more of other varieties if I think it's in their interest, because I'm a counselor. So one of my roles is counselor. So but I don't think it's improper for me to give you both. If it ever corrupts my legal analysis or deprives you of legal analysis, then I will have failed to serve you. But if I am doing both, then I think that's fine. It's not that I don't want to hear a political voice, but I do have a problem when you don't distinguish between the two. Well, I'm certainly not going to flag it. I'm not going to say, now I'm giving a legal view, now I'm not giving a political view. Hopefully, it'll be relatively clear in my dialogue or presentation when I'm referring to one. So I don't want to hide the ball, but I'm not going to explicitly try to transition, because that's way too awkward. I certainly understand why political views coming into law is certainly understandable. Yes. The issue you have, however, is very short on some explanations of your position, such as the authority of feds to enforce federal law. I was always taught in theory the state has policing authority unless ceded to the feds. Well, no, they both have concurrent jurisdiction. They have jurisdiction over their respective domains. So the feds have domains over federal property, federal assets. So if it's a federal building, such as a federal courthouse, they have the ability to police that. Now, the local police might also have some ability to do that depending on some agreements. But, federal post office, they can enforce it directly. In fact, do. In fact, the police for the postal service are badass. Postal inspectors are awesome. I thought about this a little bit, as like, I thought about, at some points, maybe I should be a police officer. And I thought to myself, if I was going to be a police officer, I'd be one of two things. I'd be a postal inspector, or I'd deal with counterfeiting with the Secret Service. I have no interest in personal protection aspect. But I always was fascinated by counterfeiting. I don't know why, but I just think counterfeiting is really interesting. We all have to have hobbies, So it's just, I found it was interesting. So I ever thought, if I wanted to do law enforcement, it'd be one of those two things. And the reason for, so the one is for counterfeiting, because I just find it's interesting. And the reason to do the postal inspector is because their jurisdiction is the mail. And the mail goes everywhere, all the places. So their jurisdiction is awesome. So postal inspector, badass. The state of Oregon specifically says you need to announce your office as LEO for state violations. That's true. And I believe the feds can enforce state law by Oregon law. So the feds can enforce Oregon law because Oregon says so, but yes, they would need to announce if they were enforcing Oregon law. So the feds, unless they have specific Oregon state training, should only be arresting for federal violations. That is 100% true. Unless they announce themselves. You are correct. I could go on. Fair enough. The simple fact is this, along with some of your points, have been covered by Lawfare blog, a blog in your newly adopted state by Texas of Law U professor. While legal, some of his points may be disappointing to me. I can accept the conclusion. Sufficient to say, I have been disappointed with your analysis. You know what? Fair enough. This is a very well-written, constructive critique. No insult taken. I appreciate, genuinely, I very much value constructive feedback. And this is very well written, very constructive feedback. There are points that I missed, points I could have highlighted. Perhaps I got too wrapped up in the political. Perhaps I did bury my legal analysis. And, this is a very well written, constructive critique. So it's appreciated. And then he says, edit. I lastly point, I'm going to have to respond to this guy, by the way. I lastly point out the issue for many years often have is point that CBP have been operating under antiquated laws. They have jurisdiction 100 miles with where more than 2/3 of people live. They sure do. They run border checkpoints far away from the border. In states such as left-wing Arizona, they're unpopular. Yes, so you fire with the checkpoints because they're perfectly legal. Okay, so I'm just going to respond to this guy real fast. So you guys are going to have to tolerate me because I think he deserves a brief written reply. I'll say, all right. And Q Squared in chat says, for what it's worth, in the matter of Portland, you did come off biased in a way that felt a bit awkward, dismissal without death, as you normally give to opposing viewpoints. You know, fair. Fair. And then I'll just spell check all the things because I can spell worth crap. Never was a good speller. Reply. That was a very, very thoughtful reply. So thank you very much to J. Alster. That was a very, very thoughtful reply. Thank you very, very much. Appreciate it. Getting words right was never a UL strong point. Fair. Very, very, very fair. So, $5. Honestly, what's wrong with being biased if you understand and announce your bias? What's wrong with being selfish as long as it's reasonable? Well, that is one thing. Like, if I'm going to be biased, I want to tell you about bias. Like, I don't want to claim to be objective if I'm not being objective. So I think I should just try to be as honest about what I am and honest about my opinions. And I was enjoying the Schadenfreude a little bit of it. I still think it's a ridiculous lawsuit. I still think the Attorney General's probably not going to get anywhere. But, we'll see. But, it did stuff, yeah. You can't do a $1 or $2 super chat sometimes. Well, Nate, it sounds like there's a solution to that problem. Like $200 super chats would solve that problem right up. So I just try to be honest about what I think. And if it compromises my legal analysis, then it's a problem. But it's very hard to be objective. That's for sure. You miss your mark here. Blanket statements. Perhaps look it up. Yeah, well, I can't look up everything, and it was written as a speculation. I'm like, I think this is probably the case. I assume this to be true. Like, I'm not labeling things as true if I don't know them to be true. So I use a lot of qualified language where I'm saying, I think this is true. This is probably the case. I imagine this, right? So I'm using qualified language for a reason. Like, I'm just guessing. But if I'm guessing, I try to label it so that, I'm not bullshitting you. I'm just like, this is what I think is probably true. This is probably true. So... Federal government has no right to arrest someone for questioning and limited right to remove someone for questioning. They can arrest someone for questioning. Well, yeah, they can arrest someone. I don't know for questioning, but, depends on the context. So, yeah, it's good stuff. Are they police or federal marshals? They're some sort of federal... Marshals is a specific service. So I don't know if they're marshals in the strictest sense of the word, but they're federal. Are they impersonating police by having police? No, they are police. They're just federal. Is there anything displaying them as marshals? Nothing identifying them as police. Yeah, we covered that. Yeah, Matt, I'm aware that there's Oregon law that gives the feds the right to enforce state law. I think I mentioned it earlier that there is law that gives them that authority. So I'm aware of that, but thank you. Someone said I got Rosenblum's pronunciation wrong. Well, I've never gotten a name pronunciation wrong ever before, so that'll be a first. It's 100 miles from any border and CoStar border, so yeah, it's like 2/3 of the United States. It's a bad thing. My understanding is most federal departments and agencies require the member to identify themselves upon request. There are exceptions, but most federal law enforcement do that. If it's not federal law but can trigger discipline, well, it can be amended if it's not law, right? It can always be amended by standard operating procedure or whatever. The judge should have ordered Pepsi deliver Harry Jet, maybe. And this is again where it says the use so to argument is very improper. Again, that's pointing out hypocrisy rather than whataboutism, and I think whataboutism is more proper than you suggest. Airports are definitely borders, yes, but I don't know if you get the 100 miles from every international airport because that would just be way too much. But yeah. Portland 100 miles from the ocean, it might be. $5 Canadian dollars from Valerie Keefe. Thank you. Why is it legal for Planned Parenthood to discriminate against trans people for purchase of HRT but not employment? Living women of Kumar today and every day. Well, I don't know the full answer to your question. Title VII, which is what they were dealing with, which is dealing with employment. I don't know what the medical provisions would be. Presumably, that would be principally under state law because medicine is typically regulated under state law rather than federal law. So when it comes to employment, there's Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which deals with employers who have more than 50 employees, as I remember, and that's the guidelines. But as it deals with who they give HRT to and not, I don't know. So, yeah. Yeah, there's kind of a Fourth Amendment exception from the border, but good question. So I don't know what the rules are on them giving therapy to various people on medical grounds. That's probably more a state law question than federal law question. Unreasonable arrests are illegal. Well, I don't know that I was saying unreasonable arrests are illegal, but that's the predicate. Are they reasonable or not? So they may be reasonable or not because the Fourth Amendment only protects the unreasonable. So we don't know if they're unreasonable or not. Yeah, it's going to be hard in the courtroom. And this, again, is about whataboutism. $5 from Ricardo Ospania. That's an interesting point. If international border is the border, where can the border control go? Well, presumably at the border, in international airports, when you land, they have a zone for the international to be screened off of. So presumably just within that zone, but I don't know the full contours of that. Okay, then this is a good one. This guy says, how can you assume anything? That's a stupid question, but he asked it anyway. He says, how can you assume anything? That does not put you in a good light. Well, I have to make assumptions because I don't know all the facts, right? I'm early in the story, so I don't know everything. So I have to use assumptions and inferences to try to fill in the gaps, but I try to label it when I do, right? So it's like, how can I assume? Because I have to, and I'm like, well, here's some things that are probably true. If they're not true, then they'll become revised down the analysis as we do more and more. $2 from Robert Zaz. 100 miles goes all the way to the Cascades. Yeah, I bet it does. This doesn't put you in a good light. Well, I label when I'm making assumptions. Police have an obligation to identify themselves. Otherwise, this industry may defend themselves against unlawful kidnapping. I'm not sure that's true as a matter of federal law. It's true as a matter of state law. Arresting people just because is tyranny. That would be true if they're arresting just because, but that's a predicate. Which you're assuming, incidentally. You're assuming it's just because, and I'm assuming it's not, right? We're both making assumptions because neither one of us knows. We don't know what was actually going through the officer's head. We don't know what their reasons are. You're assuming it's just because, I'm assuming it's not. So we're both making assumptions. The police do not have authority to just take people into custody for no reason. That's true, but that's an assumption. How can you discuss this and try to make their actions legal? for the same reason that you're discussing it, trying to make it illegal. You're assuming these things are not true. I'm assuming they are true. I'm assuming they're acting reasonably. You're assuming they're acting unreasonably. You know? Cop-splaining is what you're guilty of in this instance. Probable cause of what crimes? Well, take your pick. You know, destruction of property, destruction of federal property, riot, unrest, insurrection. There's a couple that come to mind. The federal police are thugs. Why are you guessing? Because I have to guess, and I don't know, and neither do you. You're guessing the opposite direction. These type of tactics are used in China and Russia. I think these types of tactics are not really used in China and Russia. The allegation is the guy was picked up off the street. He was brought to the federal courthouse. He was read his Miranda rights. And then when he didn't want to answer questions, he was let go. I'm guessing that is not the typical, again, guessing, but I'm guessing that is not the typical China-Russia experience. I think it might be a little bit different. How was the federal building harmed, or what's the possibility of harm? Are we watching the news? What do the police do all the time is not making their actions right? Yeah, I agree, but the hypocrisy is too rich. Austria and the martial law is never declared in this instance, so state still has sovereignty over its citizens. Yes, the federal government still has sovereignty over its citizens and over its property. And then I comment back by saying everyone makes assumptions, but I make clear when I make assumptions. I endeavor to make clear the separation between fact and speculation, which I think is a pretty reasonable response. And then this guy comes back at me with this wonderful response. You should never speculate when dealing with the law. Okay. Well, in that case, I could only cover things when they're completely over, because then I wouldn't have to speculate anymore. Even then, I sometimes have to speculate. So yeah, you should never speculate when it comes to law. Okay, that's good. Facts overrule speculation always when dealing with the law. That's right. When there are more facts, you're correct. They will overrule the law. They will overrule the speculation. I'm filling in the gaps. So are you. Every federal court case that's ever involved in required factual information. Speculation is always ignored. You're correct depending on what phase of the trial you're in, right? Because there are rules of evidence for trials. So yes, they would ultimately need to be factually based, but we're kind of at an earlier stage. So a little bit more speculation, a little bit more guessing, probably okay. I think your assumptions should be ignored unless you can find factual data to support your conclusion. Well, what's your factual basis to support the conclusion? You have no idea what's in the officer's head. You saw the officers walk up to a guy who at that moment appeared to be doing nothing wrong and escort him into a van and drive away. How do you know what the officers observed before the camera started rolling? How do you know what he's doing 5 seconds before the camera started? You have no idea. You're making a guess. You're making the guess 5 seconds before the camera started. He was just walking down the street the same as you saw, but you don't know that. You don't know what the officers observed 30 minutes before or an hour before. You know? As you're making assumptions. I'm making assumptions. I'm just making assumptions the other way. I'm glad you have the courage to point your view and offer respect for your point of the analysis. And it's like, this guy says there's no respect over speculation over legal issues. I'm like, when I don't know, I guess. You're guessing too. Did the police have probable cause to detain that guy? I don't know. I'm going to go with yes. But, if you want to go with no, so be it. How could you write a defense or prosecution without speculation? How the judge and jury will listen to your point of facts. Yeah, that's true. You have to speculate how they'll interpret facts. Yeah, you have to always think about things. So it's like, this guy says I should never speculate. I'm like, well, I'm going to keep speculating when I have to. I'm going to fill in the gaps and I'm going to give you my best guess. And here's how I think it goes out. In loco parentis usually involves school and local children. Yes, it does. I was just trying to bring into an example of a phrase you might have heard of. Because this is a phrase you didn't know, parent parentis. So I'm like, okay, here's a phrase you might have heard of, in loco parentis. And then the phrase you might have heard of more, parent, right? They all that same root. They all come from that same place. So I was using it as a point of comparison, right? It normally deals with children in schools. You're correct. That wasn't the point of me bringing it up. Is there evidence of crimes being committed by the people because there's no trial or declaration? How's this due process? Those can bring those up, but as far as questions being asked under Miranda, it only applies to questions about the crime. They can ask you other questions. I'd have to double check my case law on that one. Miranda only applies, like you said, to custodial interrogation, asking questions about the crime you're suspected of. I'd have to double check my case law on that specific point. That's a very specific point. You might be right, but I don't know. This guy says I effing rock, or this girl says I effing rock. Sweet. Thank you very much. You gotta give the side eye up, ma'am. Rakita's gonna be coming for use of lost plane. Yeah, I understand he uses that term. Yeah, so if he wants to come after me, maybe it'll be a way to start our relationship. Oh man. Who's here? No fault. Yeah, that's right. A waste of resources. Yeah, maybe you could be enforcing the law. That'd be great. On the First Amendment, you have a constitutional right to peacefully assemble, not to commit violence. Yeah, pretty much. Unless it's illegal to wear riot gear, please tell me the code for law. Yes, I have the right to ask questions, but yank someone straight. It's not illegal to wear riot gear, but if you come dressed for a particular thing, the cops may take notice and be like, that's kind of unusual, right? So everything has to be based on reasonableness in terms of the Fourth Amendment. So no, it's not unreasonable in and of itself. But if there's been an incident recently nearby involving rioting and you're wearing riot gear, might suggest that you might want to ask some questions. So So this guy says, so you're saying the police don't need probable cause to detain someone or a reasonably articulable suspicion? I'm definitely not saying that. I'm saying they don't need to tell you about it. They do need to have it, but they don't need to announce it. And so nice he responded with that. They need to, but they don't need to inform what it is. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. This is start with someone being arrested without RAS. We don't know. We don't know if they were arrested without RAS or not, because the police did not inform us. Did they have RAS? Did they have probable cause? I don't know. I'm going to assume yes. You were not half right, you were half wrong. Okay, well, fine. Does the state have a right not to have federal buildings or federal government in the state? No. No, that's an easy one. They're an independent sovereign. They can do what they want. If they can get land lawfully, they can have a building there and run it under their jurisdiction. The state can't say no. Yeah. It's no longer protesting when protesters harass the innocent. Yeah. Portland is off the edge of sanity. Yeah. You really should rebel more in your youth if you think unmarked cars are not a thing. Yeah, really. I mean, that's kind of a thing the police do. Yeah. So, all right. That's cool. So we've been going for an hour and a half. So I think that's pretty good for tonight. I should collaborate with Steve Leto. I think Steve Leto doesn't want to collaborate with me, to be quite honest. I believe he has shadow banned me from his account. When I have tried to post things in his live stream, it appears that my account has been shadow banned. So I don't know that Steve Leto wants to cooperate or do stuff with me. If he wants to, I mean, he's more than free to reach out to me. I won't turn anyone down, including Legal Eagle for that matter. If Legal Eagle wants to reach out to me, I'd do something with him. I don't know if they'd want to. But I'd do anything once to give it a try. So, if Steve Leto wants to do something with me, he can find me. I have a Discord. He can leave a comment and stuff like that. But I don't think he's interested in working with me. I don't really have any beef with him personally. He seems to have some sort of beef with me, and if that's the case, then that's fine. But he seems to have shadow banned me, so that's fine. Anyways, let me know in the comments what you think in terms of a day of the week. What would be good in terms of time. But yeah, we'll do this on a weekly basis, or at least we'll try to. So we'll tentatively schedule this, I guess, for a week from today, for next Wednesday. Wednesday's probably a good day of the week, for us to do this. And we'll see where we go from there. So hopefully this is enjoyable. And thank you for the people who super chatted. By the way, if you've not already done so, if you'd be so kind as to join my channel, I'd really appreciate it. It's only 99 cents a month. There should be a join button somewhere on your screen where the subscribe button is or should be. And the reason I ask is because I think it's probably helpful in the YouTube algorithm. I don't know how the YouTube algorithm works any more than anyone else does, but I'm going to guess that people joining is a positive signal because it gives Google money, and they like money. At some point in the future, I will probably open a subscribe star or something like that so people can give money outside of YouTube. But for the present purposes, what I'm really interested in is in people growing. What am I drinking? I am drinking Gentleman Jack from Jack Daniels. You have a shot at 38 proof with me. Thank you, $5 Q squared. It is super, super appreciated. So, yeah, you can join the Discord and stuff like that. But for the moment, I'm interested in gaining subscribers, which is why I was disappointed that my subscriber count has been falling recently. I have 8,000 something subscribers, something like that. And I'd like to get to 10, and I'd like to get to 100,000, and I'd like to go beyond that. So I'm trying to figure out ways to accomplish that. So I figured joining is a positive signal. At some point in the future, I'll do a subscribe star or something. But for the moment, I think we are where we are, and it's going to help it. It helps feed the algorithm. Yeah. I'm not going to join Patreon because I don't like their policies. I don't like the way that they deal with customers. I don't like the way they boot people off their platform. So I'm not going to do Patreon. I don't want to give them my business. I'm not sure if I've ever had Chinese liquor. I do upload stuff to BitChute. BitChute automatically. I don't get any love from there, but I do upload stuff there. I think it's automatic to copy it over there. But can that make YouTube liable for not notifying me of my videos if wishing man? So, man, I'm not sure what the thing on the videos are, but yeah. But good stuff. So we're trying to do what we can, but we're trying to grow the algorithm and stuff like that. 57 people watching, 57 likes. Well, I can't ask for much better than that. And thank you for the super chat, people. Until our next time, my friends. Hope all is well. Cheers. Goodbye.